All fine with this? Anyone, any kind of question? It's just a minute. Today we will start from this point only. However, today I'll introduce inferior commodity. Last day, this particular diagrammatic illustration, everything we did for a normal commodity. So please carefully look at the presentation, look at the slide. Now, in context of normal good, first we moved from P to Q and then we moved from Q to R. But by both the movements, that is from when we are considering a movement from P to Q, the consumption of X1 increases from say Q1 to Q2. And when again we are moving from Q to R, because of income effect, in that case also demand is increasing further. So both by substitution effect and income effect, quantity demanded increases when there is a reduction in price of X1. When there is a reduction, we started with a reduction in price of X1, and we are finding that both the substitution effect and the income effect are moving to the same direction. Both the substitution effect and income effect are telling us the demand will increase. First, there will be some increase in demand just because of the fact that one commodity, X1, has become cheaper to me. And then, as a commodity becomes cheaper, my purchasing power increases. And if a commodity is a normal good, when my purchasing power increases, consumption of all commodities will increase, including this particular normal good. So again, there will be some increase in quantity demanded from Q to R. So what we are finding that continuously there will be an increase in demand when a commodity is a normal good. Now today, we will consider otherwise the same scenario. That is, we will consider a reduction in price of X1, other things remaining constant. We will consider the Hicks definition of constancy of purchasing power. So everything I'll keep fixed. However, instead of a normal commodity, I'll consider an inferior commodity. I'll consider an inferior commodity. Okay, so let's first try to understand the matter and then we will come back in the diagram. So, today we are starting with inferior commodity. So X1 is inferior in nature. Okay. Other parameters remaining unchanged. Let's consider a reduction reduction in price of X1, which I am defining by say P1. other things remaining constant, that is money income of the consumer and price of X2 remaining constant, let's consider a reduction in price of X1. In the first step, the budget line will rotate to the right. Okay, you know this thing. And there will be a change in consumer's equilibrium. So you know all these things. So let's see. Okay. So I'm considering a two commodity world. Okay, next we consider a budget line parallel to AB prime. A budget line parallel to the new budget line AB prime. So let's consider AB prime . Okay, so last day also we did the same thing. We will consider a hypothetical budget line. However, it is not any line. It is a line which is touching the initial indifference curve. Actually, we want to draw a hypothetical budget line, which we are calling the compensated budget line. We are compensating the consumer in such a way so that she is left with enough money by which she will be able to consume along the initial indifference curve. Okay, so when I am drawing the hypothetical budget line, it's not any line I am considering, rather I am considering a line which will touch the initial indifference curve, which means I'll cut down the money in such a way from the hand of the consumer when there is a reduction in price so that she is left with the money by which she will be able to consume along the initial indifference curve. However, since the relative price is changing, now we are getting a flatter demand curve, we will not be able to consume at the initial equilibrium point. However, the consumer will be able to consume at a new equilibrium point on this hypothetical budget line, which is to the right of the original one. So this is that budget line which we are marking by HH prime. Okay. This HH prime is the Higgs compensated budget line. Now, if I compare between AB prime and HH prime, both HH prime and AB prime are showing the same relative price of X because they are parallel to each other. In other words, HH prime is indicating the new lesser relative price of X1. It is flatter than AB and it is parallel to AB prime. So it is indicating the relative price which AB prime indicates. So it is indicating lesser relative price of X1. Okay. However, HH prime has lesser vertical intercept compared to AB prime, which means we are cutting down the additional income the consumer is now enjoying because of reduction in price of X1 in such a way so that the consumer can consume along the initial indifference curve, IC1. Okay, so it is not a very good IC. Hope you will be able to draw better because here there is some problem while we draw these things in e-board. Okay, so this is a smooth convex IC, usual IC, and it is touching both AB and HH prime. It is touching both AB and HH prime. Okay, it is touching AB at point say P and touching HH prime at point Q. So let me mark. So I'm marking the first quantity, say by Q1, as we did in the last class. Okay, now the movement from P to Q, what does it mean? Is it substitution effect, income effect, or none of them?
Substitution effect.
It is substitution effect. Very good. So this is SE. The movement from P to Q, or change in demand from Q1 to Q2, is called the substitution effect, because if I compare the black and the green budget line, the original budget line and Higgs compensated budget line, between the two budget lines there is only a difference in the relative price of X1. There is only a difference in relative price of X1. HH prime indicates lower relative price of X1 compared to AB. HH prime indicates lower relative price of X1 compared to AB. However, both along AB and HH prime, the real income of the consumer remains constant. The real income of the consumer remains constant because we are following the Hicks definition of constancy of real income. Hicks definition of constancy of purchasing power, which indicates we are cutting down the income in such a way by some tax, etc., so that the consumer is left with enough income by which she will be able to purchase along the same indifference curve. So consumer can purchase along the same indifference curve. That indicates constancy in the purchasing power following Hicks. Okay, so between AB and HH prime, the real income of the consumer is fixed because both the lines can attain the same indifference curve marked by IC1. However, the relative prices between the two budget lines are different. HH prime indicates lower relative price of X1 compared to AB. So movement from P to Q we can say only because of the fact that now X1 has become cheaper to the consumer. X1 is less expensive, and for that matter, some consumption of X2 will be substituted by increase in consumption of X1. So, as you mentioned, perfect, this is the substitution effect of relative price change. Now, as I mentioned today, we are discussing the context for inferior good. We are discussing the context for inferior good. As we discussed in the last class, Q cannot be the final solution because with the new budget line AB prime, we are finding that Q is lying inside the budget line. Q is lying inside the budget line AB prime. So a rational consumer will like to move further to the right and will select an indifference curve which will touch AB prime. So a rational consumer will move to a higher indifference curve and will select an equilibrium at which a higher indifference curve is touching the budget line AB prime. Okay, so Q cannot be the final equilibrium and consumer will move to a higher indifference curve. And that movement from Q to some point along the AB prime is only because of change in real income of the consumer. Now I'm forgetting about the adjustment. I'm forgetting the fact that I used a mechanism to cut down the income. Okay, so that part we are not considering. And for that matter, between HH prime and AB prime, if we compare, the relative prices are same. The only difference is AB prime has the higher real income. So if there is any movement from Q to R, say, along the new budget line AB prime, that movement is only because of income effect. That movement is because of change in real income of the consumer. Okay. Now, in case of inferior good, as income increases, what happens? Demand
The
increases.
demand decreases.
Demand.
Decreases.
Very good. For an inferior good, if there is an increase in purchasing power, if there is an increase in real income, money income, whatever, in that case, there will be a reduction in demand for the commodity. Consumer will allot the additional income in purchasing the commodities which are either normal or luxury. However, there will be some reduction in demand for the concerned commodity, concerned inferior commodity. Okay. So via income effect, the consumer will move back. So consumer will move to the leftward direction via income effect. So if this is the direction of substitution effect, P1 is falling, and for that matter, demand for X1 is increasing via substitution effect. However, via income effect, it will move to this direction. Whenever there is a fall in P1, M by P1 is increasing, and as real income of the consumer is increasing, consumption of X1 will fall. Consumption of X1 will fall via this channel. So income effect will be to the opposite, will be in the opposite direction to the substitution effect. Via substitution effect, demand is increasing. Substitution effect always gives an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. In this case, we have started with a reduction in price, so there will be an increase in demand. If I start with increase in price, there will be some reduction in demand. So substitution effect will always give inverse relation between price and quantity demand. In case of normal good, the income effect also suggests there will be some increase in demand. However, in case of inferior good, the income effect is suggesting that there will be a reduction in quantity demanded for X1. So there will be a movement to the opposite direction of the substitution effect. Now, when we are considering this opposite direction, it may happen the income effect is lesser than substitution effect. In that case, we will move to the leftward direction compared to Q. However, that leftward direction may not be such that the point is to the left of P. Okay, because here income effect is less stronger than the substitution effect. The second possibility is when it is moving to the opposite direction, it will just stop at any point which is in the line of P. So substitution effect will be exactly equal to opposite income effect, or opposite income effect will be exactly equal to the substitution effect. The third possibility is income effect will be greater than that of substitution effect. In that case, we will settle at a point which is to the left of P. So there are three possibilities. Let's try to understand this. The first possibility is, I can consider equilibrium a point like this. So in that case, income effect is less stronger. Substitution effect is greater than that of income effect. Or what I could do, I could consider a movement, where the substitution effect is exactly equal to income effect. R can be here too. In that case, the substitution effect or the opposite income effect is exactly equal to the income effect. Or there is a possibility that I am considering the new equilibrium here. So in that case, the income effect is stronger than that of the substitution effect. Income effect. This is the income effect. Okay, via substitution effect, it moved up to this, and via income effect, it is moving up to this. So income effect is greater than substitution effect. Income effect is greater than substitution effect. So in case of inferior good, there are three possibilities. The opposite income effect is less stronger than the substitution effect. Opposite income effect is exactly equal to the substitution effect. For example, if I consider this case, in that case, the opposite income effect is exactly equal to the substitution effect. Okay. Or there is a possibility that the opposite income effect is greater than that of the substitution effect. Opposite income effect is greater than that of the substitution effect. So these three possibilities we need to discuss in context of inferior goods. These three possibilities we need to discuss in context of inferior commodities. Now, first tell me whether you are understanding the logic of movement of equilibrium in context of inferior commodity. Are you understanding the matter? Then one by one, we will elaborate the three cases in context of inferior commodity. Are you getting the point? Anyone, is there anyone who has some problem or any part I need to repeat before moving further? It's okay to everyone? Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So first we will consider a case where income effect is moving to the opposite direction, but however, it is lesser than that of the substitution effect. It is lesser than that of the substitution effect. That is, we are considering this type of case. We are considering this type of case via substitution effect. The demand is moving from P to Q. Via income effect, we are moving to the leftward direction. When there is an increase in real income, consumption of X1 is falling. So we are moving to the leftward direction. However, the position of R is such that, so that it is not offsetting the substitution effect. It is not offsetting the substitution effect. Income effect is less stronger than the substitution effect. Okay. So this is Q1. This is Q2 and this is Q3. Q3 is in between Q1 and Q2. Q3 is in between Q1 and Q2. Now, if this is the case, you know, we can draw the demand curves, the ordinary or the Marshallian demand curve and the Higgs compensated demand curves, extending the quantities to a space where we are considering price along the vertical axis, price of X1 along the vertical axis, and quantity demanded for X1 along the horizontal axis. Okay, so let's drop the quantities. So this is the first quantity. Let's consider a first level price. Okay, so I'm considering this price as P11 and this is Q1. This is Q1. Okay, next we will drop this is Q2. This is Q3 and I am considering a new reduced price given by P12. So price has been reduced. Okay. Now, if I join this point with this point, I can draw once we get 2 points, we can draw a straight line. So I can draw a straight line joining this initial point of consumption and this point of consumption. So this green demand curve, is it the Marshallian demand curve or Higgs compensated demand curve?
Higgs compensated demand curve.
Higgs compensated demand curve. Why it is Higgs compensated demand curve? Why you are thinking that it is Higgs compensated demand curve? Anyone else? Pema Durjoy?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it Higgs compensated demand curve or Marshallian demand curve?
Ma'am, I guess it is Higgs. Like the Q
It is Higgs compensated
Q2 lies
curve.
in the above figure, ma'am. Q2 lies in the Higgs compensation demand curve. I see. So
Yeah, 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 yeah. So it is based on substitution effect only. This is based on substitution effect only, and when we are measuring the substitution effect, we are adjusting the real income in such a way so that the consumer is left with enough income so that she can consume along the initial indifference curve. Okay, so this is based on Q2 as you are telling. So it is based on substitution effect only, and therefore it is the Higgs compensated demand curve. Higgs compensated demand curve. Okay, so we are understanding this is Q2. Okay, so this is okay. Next, joining this point original consumption point and this point, we can draw this straight line. This is the ordinary or Marshallian demand curve. This is the because this is based on total effect of relative price change. This is based on total effect of relative price change. Okay, so this is Q3. Okay, this is Q3. So total effect of relative price change. So what we are finding that in case of normal good, the ordinary demand curve was flatter than that of the compensated demand curve. Whereas in case of inferior commodity, the demand curve is steeper than that of the ordinary or the Marshallian demand curve. Okay. However, still we are getting a negatively sloped demand curve. Because as the substitution effect is stronger than income effect, for that matter, as price is falling from P1 to P2, there is still an increase in demand from Q1 to Q3. The increase in demand is not that much as we got in case of normal good, because in that case Q3 was to the right of Q2. However, if I compare the position with respect to initial consumption, which is given by Q1, consumption is increasing a bit. Increase in consumption is lesser than that of the normal good. However, because of reduction in price, finally we are finding that there is some increase in demand for the commodity. Total effect is still giving us an increase in quantity demanded. So there is an inverse relation between price and quantity demanded finally, and therefore the Marshallian demand curve is becoming negatively sloped. Still, the Marshallian demand curve is negatively sloped. It is steeper than that of the Hicks compensated demand curve. However, it is negatively sloped. Okay, so are you understanding everything? Everybody understood how we are deriving the ordinary demand curve and the Marshallian and the Hicks compensated demand curve here? Any question? Okay, next we said that there will be three cases. Okay, AB and AB prime I considered. This is substitution effect of relative price change. This is substitution effect. I'll consider the opposite income effect in such a way so that income effect is exactly equal to that of substitution effect. The red one will be the income effect. Whereas the green one is substitution effect. This is AC, that is IE. Okay. So this point is P, this point is Q, and this point is R. So journey from P to Q is exactly equal to the journey from Q to R. Okay. So you can say this is equal to Q3. Now this is so this demand curve is based on the movement from Q1 to Q2 or P to Q. So this is Higgs compensated demand. Now, via income effect, again we move back to Q1. Again, we move back to Q1. Okay, so what is happening? Price is reducing. It is like this. Price is reducing. However, demand remains fixed at a particular level. Demand is perfectly inelastic. Demand is perfectly inelastic at Q1. Demand is perfectly inelastic at Q1. So there will be some change in demand, some increase in demand via the substitution effect. However, if I consider the total effect, we are coming back to the initial quantity demanded. Okay, so the final demand curve will be given by this perfectly inelastic one. In this case, the Marshallian demand is inelastic compared to that of Higgs, however, not perfectly inelastic. Here, the black one is perfectly inelastic. It is perfectly inelastic. It is more inelastic compared to the blue one. In this case also, it is inelastic. However, it is perfectly inelastic. So, the black one is the
perfect inelastic.
yes. Marshallian demand curve, and as you are understanding, it is perfectly inelastic. So this is the second possibility when we are considering an inferior commodity. Finally, we will consider a case where the income effect will be stronger than that of the substitution effect. Income effect will be stronger than that of the substitution effect. So let's first mark the few points. Okay. Now I'll draw the IC.
Ma'am, does the demand become positive here?
Yeah,
Positive slope.
yes, very good. First, let me. Okay, marking the price. This is the initial price, and then price falls to this level. Joining the just joining this point, that is the initial consumption point, and this one. Initial consumption point, that is Q1 consumption at price P1, and this Q2 at price P2. We derive this demand curve. So this demand curve is based on substitution effect of relative price change. This is the Hicks compensated demand curve. So let me mark the points. This is P11. This is P12. So there is a reduction in price. This is Q1. This is Q2. And this is Q3. So this is Q1. This is Q2. This is Q3. Okay, now the initial consumption point is this. Initial consumption point is this one, and final consumption point is this one. This one. So we are getting this demand curve because this is the final consumption. P2, Q3. This is the final consumption point. Coordinate for final consumption. And this is the initial consumption point. So if I join these 2 points, I am getting a positively sloped demand curve. We are getting a positively sloped demand curve. So before telling you anything else, this is the This is the Higgs compensated demand. This is IE this is AC. So here we are finding that the demand based on the total effect that is becoming positively sloped. So when the opposite income effect is offsetting the substitution effect, or opposite income effect is stronger than that of the substitution effect, there is even a possibility that the demand curve is becoming positively sloped. So this is a special case, and this is the case for Giffen Goods. Okay, this is the case for Giffen Goods. So Giffen Goods is a particular type of inferior commodities for which it may happen when price is increasing, demand is increasing. When price is falling, demand is falling. When price is increasing, demand is increasing. It is that kind of basic needs that when price is increasing, I have to forego some other commodities. However, I need to continue my consumption for this commodity. For example, rice. If the price of rice increases, then what we have to do, we need to curtail expenditure on some other commodities, and we have to consume, or we have to spend more on rice. Okay. On the other hand, if the price of rice falls, in that case, it is not that we will continue to increase more and more rice. We will increase, in fact, we will reduce consumption of carbohydrate food, and we will increase the consumption of protein diet. So all these things happen. So if the commodity is a typical type of inferior good for which as price increases, demand increases, and as price falls, demand falls, in that case, the demand curve based on the total effect of relative price change, that will be positively sloped, and we will have a proportional relationship between price and quantity demanded. So there are three possibilities in case of inferior commodities. In the first case, the total effect is giving us a negatively sloped demand curve, though the demand curve is steeper than that of the ordinary demand curve. In the second case, the opposite income effect is exactly equal to the substitution effect. In that case, the ordinary demand or the Marshallian demand is becoming a vertical straight line. That means it is a perfectly inelastic demand. And finally, if the opposite income effect offsets the substitution effect, in that case, we are getting a positively sloped Marshallian demand curve, and this is called the case for Giffen Goods. This is the case for Giffen Goods. Okay, so first tell me if you have any question. Otherwise, I'll give a brief notes on inferior commodities. Is it okay, or there is some part which I need to repeat? Got everything perfectly? Shreyoshi Guhoroy, Shreyoshi.
Yes, ma'am.
Could you understand everything?
Yes, ma'am. Understood.
Okay, so all the possibilities in case of inferior commodities, everything is fine.
Yes, ma'am.
Pranjali,
Yes, ma'am.
it's okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So let's come back to this and add a note. What was the figure number in the last case? 1A. Or 1AB, I think. So call this figure then this 3A, 3B. And the last one 4A, 4B. Okay, so make a new paragraph. If X1 is an inferior good, then income effect if X1 is an inferior good, then income effect leads to a reduction in demand for X1. That is, there is a movement from Q2 to a point to the left of Q2. There will be a movement from Q2 to a point to the left of Q2. Here, substitution effect and income effect. Here, substitution and income effects move to the opposite directions. But the opposite income effect does not totally offset the substitution effect, so that the total effect is to results in an increase in demand for X1. Total effect results in an increase in demand for X1. Hence, the ordinary or the Marshallian demand curve will be negatively sloped. Ordinary or Marshallian demand curve will be negatively sloped as shown in figure 2b. As shown in figure 2b. However, here the ordinary demand curve will be steeper than Higgs compensated demand curve. Ordinary demand curve will be steeper than Higgs compensated demand curve. Next para. In case of inferior good, if opposite income effect is exactly equal to the substitution effect, the demand curve, or you can write the ordinary demand curve, becomes vertical. The ordinary demand curve becomes vertical. Here, the demand is perfectly inelastic. Next para. Finally, demand is in the earlier case, demand is perfectly inelastic as shown in figure 3b. Next, finally, if X1 is an inferior good, and opposite income effect is stronger than substitution effect. Then a fall in price of X1 ultimately leads to a fall in quantity demanded. as shown in figure 4a. As shown in figure 4a. Here the demand curve is upward sloping. Here the demand curve or Marshallian demand curve is upward sloping. This is the case for a special type of inferior goods. This is a case for special type of inferior goods called Giffen goods. Called Giffen goods. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So next, just to wrap up this part, we can summarize the entire thing using this table. We are considering reduction in prices, so price decreases. In case of normal good, via substitution effect, there will be increase in quantity. Via income effect also, there will be an increase in quantity. In case of inferior goods, as price decreases via substitution effect, quantity increases. However, via income effect, quantity decreases. I'm calling this table 1. In table 1, if X is a normal good, both substitution and income effects increase its quantity. If X is an inferior good, in that case, there are several possibilities. Number 1, if substitution effect is greater than income effect, substitution effect is greater than opposite income effect, quantity finally increases, and therefore we get a negatively sloped demand curve, negatively sloped Marshallian demand curve, as we discussed in case of 2A and 2B. On the other hand, if substitution effect is less than income effect, quantity decreases. So when price is decreasing, quantity is also decreasing. This unusual good is called Giffen good. A Giffen good must be an inferior good. However, remember that all inferior goods are not necessarily Giffen goods, because there are two other cases. In 2A, 2B, and 3A, 3B, we captured the cases for inferior goods. However, the demand curve is not positively sloped. The demand curve is not positively sloped. In the first case, the demand curve is still negatively sloped, and in the second case, the demand curve is vertical. So, Giffen good is an inferior good, definitely. However, all inferior goods are not Giffen goods. Okay, so for Giffen good, we are getting an upward sloping demand curve. Actually, the concept of Giffen good came in our analysis from the Irish potato famine, the famous Irish potato famine. So during this famine, what the people started to do, potato is the basic food item in Ireland. So people started to buy more and more potato, because that is the basic item. That is the basic item they need. So people, as the price of potato is increasing, people are curtailing their consumption of meats and spending money more on potato. This we found in context of Irish potato famine. And this is the starting of understanding there can be special circumstances when, as price is falling, demand may fall, and at the same time, when price is increasing, the demand is increasing. Okay, this is for the first time statisticians and economists observed this thing. And then after the name of Giffen, who actually made a theoretical structure out of this example, we call the commodities Giffen Goods. Okay, people consumed lots of potato but little meat and other food, since meat was more expensive. Price of potato rose, people had less money to consume meat, so they ate more potatoes instead of meat. So this happens for the very, very basic necessity items. If the price of those commodities increase, in that case, actually we reduce consumption of other items and increase consumption of that basic item. Okay, and therefore we get a proportional relationship between price and quantity demanded. This type of commodities are called the Giffen goods. So this is all about, the cases, the possible cases we can think about for normal and inferior commodities. Okay. However, here in the class, I have done everything considering a reduction in price, So now I'm giving you a homework. So please write down homework. Analyze the cases of substitution effect and income effect for normal and inferior commodities, when price of X1 increases, use Higgs compensation principle. Use Higgs compensation principle to derive your results. Use Higgs compensation principle to derive your results. Okay, so next day I'll start talking about Slutsky compensation principle. Higgs compensation principle is done. On the next day, the similar kind of cases we will discuss with the Slutsky compensation principle. Once I complete the Slutsky compensation principle, we need to compare between Higgs and Slutsky. Okay, is there any difference? Is there any similarity in the results derived by Higgs and Slutsky? Okay, and again, I'll consider the cases when there is a reduction in price, and it will be your task to do the same for when there is an increase in price. Okay, when there is an increase in price. So this is all for today.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, please can you tell me the chapter name for today's part on the